Hello and welcome to Doondoes DVD, and this is Disney Classics number 13, Alice in Wonderland. Now this one is a bit of a strange one in my mind at least. It's like I seem to be super familiar with the story of Alice in Wonderland, but I can't really think of one specific instance of piece of media that I've seen lots of times enough to be that familiar with it. I have vague recollections of reading it as a kid, or possibly even being read it. But if that's the case, that was over 30 years ago. I've not seen the Tim Burton version. Bits of it were mentioned in the Once Upon a Time TV series, but only a few. As far as I can remember, I haven't actually seen this Disney version of it. Looking at the poster, nothing rings a bell there, and checking on my letterboxd, I haven't previously ticked it as watched, which isn't a 100% accurate signal, but it's a good sign. Somehow it seems that even though it hasn't been remade that many times, and I haven't seen that many different versions of it, still I seem to know lots about it. Growing and shrinking, smiling Cheshire cats, mad hatters, and queens and playing cards, and off with his head. It seems somehow that this one has deeply seeped into popular culture, and so it's had lots of tiny references all over the place. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that means that the original book source material was more popular than the film version compared to any of the previous Disney releases. But that does mean, even though I know what basic story beats to expect, it means I know nothing about what to expect about Disney's interpretation of this story. Hopefully it's a good one. Let's find out. Well, I've got to say, I'm actually quite surprised that I really enjoyed this one. And I'm also kind of glad about that fact, because I've been worrying that I've been being a bit negative about all of these so far. I would go so far as to say, of the 13 we've seen so far, this is my favourite. At least it's either this or Fantasia. They're pretty close to the top spots at the moment. Couldn't really even say why I enjoyed this so much, but I think it's mostly because there's just so much more fun and whimsy here. Some of the earlier ones they seemed a bit dreary, to be honest. And it's really nice to actually have what seems to be a decent amount of story for a change. It's a completely bonkers all over the place story, but there's a lot more going on than just, a princess and an unnamed prince falling in love. And it's quite an interesting structure as well. It's actually kind of more like lots of separate shorts as Alice travels through Wonderland and meets different characters, but it's like one character at a time, and none of these segments have a massive effect on any of the other segments, really. But if I'm reading Wikipedia correctly, that's also kind of how it's set up in the book, with one chapter per character. Many of these segments I recognised the story for, but there were also quite a few I didn't. But I also noticed in the opening credits that this is based on Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass, and I know less about the second one. They seem to have smushed what they consider the best bits of both into one thing. There's also one bit in a dark forest with loads of weird and wonky creatures that I couldn't find any reference to as to which book it originally came from, so I'm wondering whether that's possibly even an original edition. Although admittedly the wiki summaries I was reading were fairly short, so maybe they just skipped over that bit. There's a song towards the end about painting the roses red, and that seemed particularly familiar, but I'm still not entirely convinced I've ever seen this entire film before. I think I've probably just seen a clip of that bit at some point. But speaking of music, that was the one part that lets it down a bit and doesn't make it a 5-star film, which is somewhere below that. It's just the music just again wasn't very interesting. To me at least anyway, as I mentioned before. Those early days sort of choral harmonies just don't do it for me. There's no tune, there's no depth, and a day later now, I've forgotten it all already. But I do remember all the fun visuals, that's what stands out for this one. And that's about it for this one. I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it. Have you seen it? What did you think? Tell me about that in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again next week with Peter Pan.